design. We began working on the design in 2000, I guess, and it was constructed and complete by 2002. The project was a sustainable infrastructure project to begin with. We didn't come to the city and encourage them to take this park and make it into a piece of green infrastructure. Bloomington, being kind of a progressive place, already knew that this park sat in a very strategic location for them relative to stormwater, and the project was it was joint Parks Department and Utilities Department effort. And just to put it in context, north is to the right in this image. For those of you familiar with Bloomington at all, campus is kind of down this way, and then downtown Bloomington is kind of over here. If you're coming down State Road 37 and you take the College Avenue exit, you'll travel in on this road here. It comes by Cascade Park, and then College Avenue splits into College and Walnut Street here, and then Miller Showers Park lies between that one-way pair. And so it's a gateway. That's the notable thing, I guess. It's a gateway, and the city realized it was an opportunity for them to kind of put what they believed about sustainability and water quality and quality of life on display front and center at their front door. About half of the water from downtown Bloomington goes through this piece of ground, by the way, this 9 acres. So a 180-acre watershed ultimately all sort of finds its way to the south end of Miller Showers Park, travels to the north end, and then on to Cascades Creek, it's part of the Cascades Creek watershed. This is a picture of what it looked like before any work occurred. It was just kind of a leftover space. There was this big grade change down into sort of a basin here, which made it very difficult to walk across, and you'll see how we address that in a minute. It had this meandering stream, not really a stream, it was more like it was a regulated drain, and it had a little bit of water in it, but during significant storm events, when you had that 180-acre watershed plowing down through here, you can see how the sides of this channel are nearly vertical. And so they were just losing huge amounts of soil as water came blasting through here. There was nothing to slow it down, a lot of erosion, very little water quality treatment happening, a lot of just sort of randomly placed trees out here, the Kiwanis Club cannon and things like that. There were 2 significant pieces of sculpture out in the park, which part of the goal of the project was to provide a new setting for those and incorporate them somehow into the design. And this one on the left we just left in place. This one we picked up out of the floodplain and gave it a new home at the north end of the park, where it was much more prominent. But you can kind of see on the bottoms of these a little bit of moisture was wicking up from these pretty frequently. This area would be inundated, and the sculptures were in danger of being damaged if they were there much longer. So this was kind of the very rough program. The idea was to detain and slow water, clean the water, incorporate these existing sculptures, provide trail connections to Cascades Park. On either side of the park, we designed some trails that provided a connection up to Cascades Park. It was kind of an important missing link in the city's alternative transportation system. Relocate utilities outside of the park. There were some electrical utilities that crossed back and forth through the park, and underground storm lines and so forth, and we pulled all those things outside of the park. Create a gateway, and then provide a design that can be readily maintained. So here's the overall plan, and we'll look at just some plan enlargements of this in a second, but basically the water, again, is coming, most of the water is coming in through this end of the park, making its way north, and then exiting right here at a box culvert. So what's happening at the south end of the park is there's a parking lot for just a few cars, and then the box culvert that delivers the majority of the water to the park is right here. If you're not familiar with the term, it's just a big square concrete pipe that a lot of other pipes are sort of bringing water into. We chose to make that moment kind of a special moment in the park and really sort of celebrate the place where all this water enters in and gives the park kind of its life. So there's a pier right there that you'll see a picture of in just a second. From there, the water comes into a basin where a lot of suspended solids in the water have an opportunity to settle out. And then it makes its way through a series of chambers that are constructed wetlands, and they're divided by these concrete and stone walls that help to negotiate about a 15-foot grade change from one end of the park to the other. But as the water spills over these little weirs, it also oxygenates the water, which helps with cleaning it. This bridge right here was, I talked earlier about how difficult it was to get down into the park and back up. There's a lot of residential areas on this side of the park and a lot of commercial retail stuff over here. And that bridge was a very important sort of link to allow people to gain access to those things, connect the community and make it a much more livable place. At the north end is where we relocated the big sculpture that looked like two faces facing one another. So again, this is one way this way, and this is one way this way, so we located that towards this traffic that's coming into town. And the sculpture is, the theme of that sculpture is diversity, so something very important to the community. This is that pier at the south end. The big box culvert is actually on the other side of this large wall, but it's taking its cues from a couple of different things. We wanted to play around a little bit with the idea of a treatment facility and kind of the industrial nature of them. It intrigued us a little bit to use some design vocabulary from something like that. But it's covered in this random ashlar limestone, which, if you know Bloomington at all, that's the heart, of limestone country. And some of the detailing also sort of ties into some WPA era park shelters in another larger park farther to the north. And here's the other side of that. The pier is also a water feature. We're pumping water out of this and then up through sort of a tube and then out the end of it. And the idea, again, is to oxygenate it, make that part of the cleansing process, but also draw attention to water and help to celebrate water as a resource. And that's the end of the pier. This, I like this photo because it so happens that this is the only tree, it's a bald cypress, and it's the only tree that was left after all the grading and earthwork was done. We just had to store so much water and do so much earthwork, there wasn't any way to save any other trees. And the other part of the story is that the contractors actually got started quite a bit later, several months later than they thought they were going to. And it so happens that they started clearing the site on Earth Day. So, of all the days. And Bloomington is a place where there are people who will go up and, chain themselves to trees and things like that when they don't want some construction to happen. So that was a big PR problem for the Parks Department, but completely, by accident. This is looking south. The pier is way back here. And then here's this series of constructed wetlands with these little places here where the water can overflow. And it's a sunny day. It's very calm, in this photo. But on a pretty decent storm event, this becomes a huge water feature. It's really fun to watch it sort of working because water just looks like it's blasting out of this, like it's being projected, by a mechanism of some kind. And it really comes to life, and it becomes this big water feature. There's the end of the bridge that ties that residential and commercial area together. And there's one last kind of pond right here that the bridge crosses before most of the water comes down this little chute right here and into a reconstructed stream. So you remember what that channel looked like before. It was the sides were vertical. There was a lot of erosion, very little to slow the water or treat it. This is now, these slopes have been laid back. They're armored with local stone. There's a lot of plant material down in there and pools and riffles and the kinds of things that will contribute to making that a healthy stream. And that's a view from the north end looking south at the two faces